And have you heard about like actual physical evidence more than like witness eyewitnesses, physical any physical?
Yes, of course. A typical example, and I visited this site location many years ago, Delphos, Kansas. Ted Phillips, the guy who collects these close encounters, if you will, with the objects on the ground, he lived in the next state over, Missouri, as opposed to Kansas. And uh, the sheriff was had a report given to him by the Johnson family in Delphos. Ronnie Johnson, age 16, saw the object sitting just a foot or two off the ground, maybe 10 feet in diameter. And he uh, stood there gawking at it, and then he couldn't move. He was paralyzed. The object took off slowly. He dashed into the house, told his mother that he had just been watching a flying saucer. She laughed. He said, "You don't need to believe me. Go outside and look." So she went outside. She did see it leaving. Then she over to where it had been on the ground. And there was a ring about 10 feet in outer diameter and feet in inner diameter, uh, where the soil had been all dried out. And he dug down into the soil, the nearby soil, for a control sample, and the affected soil. And down 14 inches in the ring, the soil was dried out. And it wouldn't support plant growth for the next couple of years. Took samples of that and stuff. So Ted told me about it. I asked him to send me samples of the dirt. I called around to find the best soil testing laboratory. I was living in California, and they worry about testing soil that doesn't grow stuff because California is a very productive farming state, and you have to know what's wrong with the soil, what's missing. So the soil wouldn't absorb moisture, and they said the level of soluble minerals, the soil was too salty, if you will, to support plant growth. That's a physical trace case. More than one person, the sheriff, the family called the sheriff, and he came out and looked at this and agreed that it was very strange. So there are thousands of such cases. There are the abduction cases, hundreds of those that we know about. There's an awful lot of evidence. And in my lectures, I typically talk about 5 large-scale scientific studies, and after each one, I describe the data in the study. How many people here have read this? And typically, it's less than 2%. So I know that people haven't looked at the important evidence, the big studies. And look, as a physicist, you go to the summary reports, the big studies. You don't look at individual cases so much as the large picture. And we have a lot of data that most debunkers don't seem to want to deal with at all. And I have checked my audiences. And I, like I said, only had 11 hecklers, and 2 of them were drunk. So I know, and I've talked to as many as 2,000 people at once. So I've had a good sampling, all 50 states in the United States, all 10 Canadian provinces, and 19 other countries. So I get around.
And have you noticed a change in attitude among debunkers or skeptics over the time? Has that changed since you started?
Well, there've always been a very small percentage of nasty, noisy negativist people who say there's nothing to this, and I think the acceptance has certainly changed. I've had a good response right since my first lecture in 1967. But remember, I bring to the table being a nuclear physicist, working for major corporations, having collected tons of data. I've been to 20 archives, state archives, document archives, government archives. And so I've been digging for a long time. Most people have not. But I'd say I don't worry about it anymore. And in one audience, University of Manitoba, somebody in the question and answer period said, "How about polling this audience?" I had given the results of a Gallup poll, which showed there were more believers than non-believers, et cetera. And I said, "Well, I don't usually ask my audience to stick their necks out. That's my job." He said, "Well, I don't think they'd mind." Everybody clapped. So, Okay, I asked two questions. I told them I would ask two questions. How many believe some UFOs are intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft? And the other question is how many believe no UFOs are intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft? More than 90% said some were. That's pretty good. So that's one of the reasons I don't get a hard time. I say what other people are afraid to say because they don't know that it's okay to say.